Whereas the other aspects of producing Spanish books, buying the paper, binding the books, and finally shipping them to South America. After shipping, he'd fly south to help organize distribution. As recalls, because of the third world conditions in South America, we tried to keep the price of the books lower than usual. To accomplish this, Prabhupada allowed us to adjust some printing standards that he restricted about in the United States. One example was that he permitted us to print Srimad Bhagavatam in soft copy instead of hard. It's a very good example of Desha Calcutta, time, place, and circumstance. Prabhupada had a very strict standard that he wanted the books printed in terms of the size of them, the quality of paper, quality of the binding, the cover, pictures, etc. But more than that, was he wanted them to be distributed and read by people. And if it meant that cutting back on his usual standards of quality meant that more would be printed, and that was a higher principle. By December 1975, the Spanish division of the BBT became the most productive foreign BBT in the world, and the South American devotees became world champions in book distribution. In that same year, Hridayananda also deployed Mahavir Das to Brazil to open a Portuguese BBT office. Following the usual formula of allotting funds for construction from the printing and distributing of books in Brazil, the devotees were able to build a beautiful new temple. They named it Nova Gokula, and it became yet another vibrant and magnificent ISKCON center. Meanwhile, the BBT operations Srila Prabhupada established in Los Angeles continued to thrive. Rameshwar remembers, in order to organize the book distribution calendar, and I developed a central warehouse and counting system for the first time. When we presented this to Srila Prabhupada, they said that it was revolutionary. In effect, he said, you should not hesitate to use your American intelligence, which is Krishna's gift to you. Please utilize it to distribute these books. Srila Prabhupada felt that this warehouse system and central accounting system were going to greatly enhance his book distribution program. The basic system was that we should have a warehouse in Los Angeles and a second in New York. We would have a manager at each warehouse, and we hope to eventually have 5 warehouses. There would also be a central accounting office in Los Angeles, and that office would give instructions to the warehouse to release the book in an efficient manner. Prabhupada's distribution key. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 5, Chapter 19, entitled The Island of Jamboree, text number 22. Is that right? 22? Kim Dushkararna Kratubhistapo Vrata. I think we can do this one together. Kim Dushkararna Kratubhistapo Vrata. Kim Dushkararna Kratubhistapo Vrata. Danadibir Va Dujayena Falguna Danadibir Va Dujayena Falguna Na Yatra Narayana Pada Pankaja Yatra Narayana Pada Pankaja Smriti Pramusta Tishayena Driyotsavat. I think Sanskrit must have some of the longest words in the world. Okay. Smriti Pramusta Tishayen Driyotsavat. Kim duskarayana kratubishta povratayar. Kim duskarayana kratubishta povratayar. Tanadibirva jujayina falguna. Tanadibirva jujayina falguna. Nayatra narayana pada pankaja. Nayatra narayana pada pankaja. Smriti pramushtati shayendriyotsavat. Smriti pramushtati shayendriyotsavat. Kim duskarayana katubishta povratayar. Tanadibirva jujayena falguna. Nayatra narayana pada pankaja. Smriti pramushtati shayendriyotsavat. Please chant.
Kim Duskarayana Kratibishta Povrataya. Kim Duskarayana Kratibishta Povrataya. Dhanaviyava Duyadena Falguna. Dhanaviyava Duyadena Falguna. Layatra Narayana Pada Pankaja. Layatra Narayana Pada Pankaja. Smriti Pramushta Sendriya Shava. Kim Duskarayana Kratibishta Povrataya. Duskarayana Kratibishta Povrataya. Dhanaviyava Duyadena Falguna. Dhanaviyava Duyadena Falguna. Nayatra Narayana Pada Pankaja. Nayatra Narayana Pada Pankaja. Smriti Pramushtati Shayendriyotsavat. Smriti Pramushtati Shayendriyotsavat.
Anyone else like to try? Any ladies like to try? Okay. Kim, what is the value? Duskarai, very difficult to perform. Na, our kratubi, with performances of sacrifice. Tapa, with austerities. Vratai, vows. Dana adibi, with executing charitable activities and so on. Va, or Yujayena, with achieving the heavenly kingdom. Falguna, which is insignificant. Na, no. Yatra, where? Narayana Pada Pankaja, of the lotus feet of Lord Narayan. Smriti, the remembrance. Pramushta, lost. Atishaya, excessive. Indriya Utsavat, due to material sense gratification. Translation. The demigods continue after performing the very difficult tasks of executing Vedic ritualistic sacrifices, undergoing austerities, observing vows, and giving charity. We have achieved this position as inhabitants of the heavenly planets. But what is the value of this achievement? Here we are certainly very engaged in material sense gratification, and therefore we can hardly remember the lotus feet of Lord Narayan. Indeed, because of our excessive sense gratification, we have almost forgotten his lotus feet. Please repeat. The demigods continue after performing the very difficult tasks of executing Vedic ritualistic sacrifices, undergoing austerities, observing vows and giving charity. We have achieved this position as inhabitants of the heavenly planets. But what is the value of this achievement? Here, we are certainly very engaged in material sense gratification, and therefore we can hardly remember the lotus feet of Lord Narayan. Indeed, because of our excessive sense gratification, we have almost forgotten his lotus feet. Srila Prabhupada's purport. The land of Bharatvarsh is so exalted that by taking birth there, one can not only attain the heavenly planets, but can also go directly back home, back to Godhead, as Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita 9:25. Yanti deva vrata devan pitrin yanti pitri vrata pitani yanti bhuttejya yanti mad yajinopimam. Those who worship the demigods will take birth among the demigods. Those who worship ghosts and spirits will take birth among such beings. Those who worship ancestors go to the ancestors, and those who worship me will live with me. People in the land of Bharatvarsh generally follow the Vedic principles and consequently perform great sacrifices by which they can be elevated to the heavenly planets. However, what is the use of such attainments? As stated in Bhagavad Gita 9:21, Kshine punya marchalo kan vishanti. After the results of one's sacrifices, charity, and other pious activities expire, one must return to the lower planetary systems and again feel the pangs of birth and death. However, one who becomes Krishna conscious can go back to Godhead, yanti mad yajino pimam. Therefore, the demigods even regret having been elevated to the higher planetary systems. The denizens of the heavenly planets regret that they could not take full advantage of being born in the land of Bharatvarsh. Instead, they become captivated by a higher standard of sense gratification, and therefore they forget the lotus feet of Lord Narayan at the time of death. The conclusion is that one who has taken birth in the land of Bharatvarsh must follow the instructions given personally by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Yadgatva na nivartante taddama paramam mama. One should try to return home back to Godhead, to the Vaikuntha planets, or to the topmost Vaikuntha planet, Goloka Vrindavan, to live eternally in full blissful knowledge in the company of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Om Agyanatamarandhasya Gyananjana Salakaya Chaturmilitam Yena Tasma Shri Gurave Namaha Bhakam Karoti Vachalam Pangam Lagate Girim Yat Kripatamaham Vande Shri Gurindinataranam Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasudeva Gaura Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So the translation again. The demigods continue after performing the very difficult tasks of executing Vedic ritualistic sacrifices, undergoing austerities, observing vows, and giving charity. We have achieved this position as inhabitants of the heavenly planets. But what is the value of this achievement? Here we are certainly very engaged in material sense gratification, and therefore we can hardly remember the lotus feet of Lord Narayan. Indeed, because of our excessive sense gratification, we have almost forgotten his lotus feet. So this spirit of enjoyment, it can cause us so much difficulty. The demigods, they were already on the earthly planet, Bharatvarsh, and by understanding the Karmakanda sections of the Vedas, how they can improve their lot in the material world, then they performed great austerities And the austerities they performed were not some small-time thing. It was very prolonged period of times. They made great sacrifices, etc. But underlying it was a material desire. They wanted something in return. So that's why it's called karma kanda, because they get something in return for it. Whereas the devotees' activities, we're learning, at least we're trying to, learn how to do something without any expectation for anything in return. Let's go back to yoga. Selfless devotional service. Now, of course, this selfless devotional service is not to be aimed at anyone. It's not that we do selfless devotional services to just anyone. It has to be to Krishna. Krishna can perfectly reciprocate. One is selflessly devoted to someone who is egotistic, self-centered, selfish, and who will exploit us, then our selfless devotion is actually not going to bear the right fruit. So we can analyze who are all the different personalities in this world. Of course, we may not have met them personally, but from the Vedic literatures we can understand there are different demigods, and sometimes people take to worshipping demigods generally for some temporary material benefit. Even the demigods live for a huge duration of time, such a vast time we can't conceive of with our conception of what this life is. Like even when we're in this lifetime, it says we may live 70 years, 100 years at most. Occasionally somebody lives to 100 years and then the Queen sends them a telegram, well done, you made it. But what's the real achievement? Anyway, sometimes, so when we're in this human form of life, when we're a small child, maybe 3, 4, 5-year-old, and we see our parents and grandparents and we think, well, that's an eternity away. I'll never get to that age. I don't even have to think about it. It's so far away. But as we get older, we get closer to that time and we realise, time is getting short. And everybody says that who's old, they always look back and say, use your time well because you regret it when you're older if you don't. And they all say that out of regret because they never listened to the good advice of the people who were before them. So we follow in the footsteps and we take advice from people who didn't take advice from, or we don't take advice from people who never took advice from their predecessors. And this is called chewing the chewed. What's the Sanskrit for that again? Punascharvana. Exactly. Charvananam, is it? Yes, so it means sometimes we may find, I don't know if anyone's had the experience, if you go to India or many other places, one of the natural crops they have is sugarcane, and they have a grinder. You put the sugarcane through and it gets juice out of it. So if someone takes, and then so you're left with the sugarcane in one bucket and all the spent cane was lying on a heap elsewhere. Now, if someone comes along at the end of the day after the sugarcane juice wala has finished his work, and they take that sugarcane and think, somebody's left this behind, I'll enjoy this. And then they try to squeeze some pleasure out of it. And they maybe get a little drip or two here and there. And then someone else, and then they discard it. And then someone else comes along and picks it up and think, somebody's left this behind. How fortunate am I? And then they try to squeeze some pleasure out of it. So the material world is like that. We're trying to squeeze some pleasure out of the material world. And undoubtedly there may be some little pleasure, but because we're so bereft of positive pleasure, we think whatever tiny little pleasure we get is good. So therefore, for example, the demigods, they had to perform sacrifices for many thousands of years, many lifetimes even, to get to the position where they're in a very comfortable and enjoyable position. But ultimately it's temporary, and they have to give it up and then go back down to the earthly plane to decide what they're going to do again. And here the demigods are speaking, and they're saying that they're enjoying so much that they forget about Krishna. When do they remember Krishna? Anybody? At Hoaxtipra?
When everything's difficult.
Yeah, when there's some difficulty, when there's some danger. Sometimes you get some. There's two types of persons mentioned in Bhagavad Gita: suras and asuras, the godly and the demons. They call them demons not because they necessarily have big fangs and horns, but because of their consciousness, their mentality is one of exploitation and subjugating others to their will for their pleasure. And because also they're godless, they have no consideration of consequences of their actions, and they simply want to enjoy without having to go through proper channels. So they may perform great austerities also and get mystic powers, etc. And their intention is simply to conquer over the demigods so they can enjoy their opulent kingdom. So sometimes a living entity may be a demigod, sometimes it may be a demon. These are not eternal manifestations, these are not eternal fixtures. Just like sometimes you may be supporting one football team and then you decide to go to the other side and you support them. So we can adopt, the living entity is so flexible. Just like sometimes people are performing yoga to become more flexible. The living entity is so flexible, it can take birth in the body of an elephant or a fly. It's mentioned in the Bhagavad Gita that the living entity, the Jivatma, the spirit soul, is in size is 1/10,000th part of the tip of a human hair. So in other words, it's atomic in size. It's not that we can just peel the layers of the body behind. It's said that the soul is situated in the region of the heart. So it's not that someone who's doing maybe open heart surgery will say, oh, look, there's a soul sitting in there. They won't see that. The consciousness is there. And the consciousness is pervading the entire body through when the blood is going through the heart, it picks up the consciousness and passes it through the whole body. If you restrict the flow of blood to your hand, for example, then the consciousness is no longer there. So anyway, the soul is tiny and it can accommodate anybody. This is the wonderful thing of the soul. And we accommodate different bodies, and just like an actor may put on different costumes, so sometimes, just like sometimes we do dramas and the devotee may play the part of a demon or a part of a devotee, or they could play the part of an animal, we can play the part, but actually all these parts are not really us. So even this playing the part of a great demigod, that is not even the living entity's real identity. And the demigods are reminded of this when there's some threat to them. If someone, it's just like, say someone is enjoying a nice party, everyone's having a great time, and then some upstarts come and they want to gate crash the party, and their enjoying spirit is disturbed, isn't it? Like, oh, call the police, get rid of these guys, we're having such a nice party. So that's what it's like. Demigods are having a party, a big long-term party, and somebody's trying to gate crash it. But even if that isn't there also, then they're because they're enjoying so much, they forget some of the knowledge which they already achieved. And this is actually detrimental for the soul, for the living entity's eternal progress. Just like when we're young, our parents try to give us good advice, but because we want to enjoy, we know better, we go and do something against the good advice of the parents or more sensible friends, and then perhaps we learn because things don't turn out the way we hoped. When we're enjoying, we don't want anything to stand in the way of that enjoyment. Don't be a party pooper. So sometimes the devotees, when they're trying to share Krishna consciousness with each other, sometimes they appreciate it, sometimes they don't. Oh, you're stepping in the way of my good time. I'm enjoying myself here. But this human form of life is very valuable, so valuable that we want to get the best out of it. And therefore, Prabhupada says here, at the first paragraph, in the first paragraph of this purport, the land of Bharatavarsha, in other words, the earthly planet, this human, especially its human form of birth, is so exalted that by taking birth there, one can not only attain the heavenly planets, but can also go directly back home, back to Godhead, as Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita. And then Krishna explains that according to who we worship, or our consciousness, then we will take birth in that particular situation. Therefore, there's an old Buddhist saying that you have to be careful of what you desire because you might get it. You have to understand, is what we are desiring really the best thing I can desire? Or is there something better that I should be desiring? Ultimately, everybody's desiring eternal bliss and knowledge, but sometimes we want to cash in quickly and get some cheap result because we're so desperate for enjoyment. The material world is compared to a desert. And if you're in a desert and you're thirsty, then even a drip of water would be greatly appreciated. So because the material world it's not actually Satchit Ananda, eternal, full of bliss and full of knowledge. It's asat, it's temporary. Who can argue with that? It's temporary. At one point, it wasn't manifest. It's manifest for some time, and then it will become dissolved in due course of time as well. And it's not necessarily full of bliss. We don't have to look very far to see that a lot of people in this world, even on this planet, even in this country, they're not experiencing great bliss. And that is a result also because the knowledge which they have, which is within them already, has been covered by ignorance. Therefore, they say ignorance is the cause of all suffering. So that ignorance can be the cause of our suffering because of us ignoring to do the right thing, or someone ignoring the suffering of other people, not helping them, or not taking good advice, etc. And here also Prabhupada says that sometimes the demigods even regret getting elevated to the higher planets because they know also that their lifetime is temporary. So just like, so imagine you're a devotee in your previous life, and then you realize you were not perfect, you have to take birth again. You take birth in the human form of life, it's not bad, you've only got 70 years, and then in that period of time you can do a lot of good with it and go back to Krishna. But imagine you take birth as a demigod and you realize, I've got 100,000 years. Damn it, I'm stuck for another 100,000 years. So sometimes people, if they're materialistic, they might consider a demigod birth being a great triumph, but a devotee considers a demigod birth is actually a great failure. Because material sense gratification, material enjoyment is a distraction to Krishna consciousness. Of course, that doesn't mean to say that artificially we make ourselves miserable. We can be happy, we can still, enjoyment comes of its own accord anyway. We don't have to go and search it out. So, Prabhupada mentions in Bhagavad Gita that an intelligent person doesn't like to suffer. So if we're suffering, we can realize that my intelligence is lacking. First of all, we have a material body, so material body means suffering. Can anyone say they haven't suffered at all in this life? It's a fact. We suffer threefold miseries. Miseries coming from our own body and mind, natural phenomena, and from other living entities. So that's a fact of the material world, but how we cope with that that will determine whether we have taken the best and made the best use of a bad bargain. So at one time, one of Prabhupada's disciples said to him, well, because of what we did previously, we were taking drugs, etc., then we burnt our brains out, we're not very, we're a bit wasted. And Prabhupada says, never mind, just make the best use of a bad bargain. Body's a bad bargain even at the best of times. And this is in relation to the amazing potential of the spirit soul. Now, of course, if you want to look in relevant terms, you might think, oh, someone's very beautiful, someone's very powerful, wealthy, intelligent, but it's all in relevant terms, but only in relation to other bodies, embodied beings. But in relation to the amazing spirit soul, which is eternal, never dies, cannot be cut into pieces by any weapon, cannot be drowned, cannot be moistened by water, withered by the wind, burnt by fire, indestructible, immutable, eternally the same. Now, Krishna explains the amazing nature of the spirit soul in the 2nd chapter of the Gita. So by comparison to that, it's mentioned that the spirit soul is more brilliant than even millions of suns, self-effulgent. But due to association with matter, since time immemorial, then we become covered by the very powerful effect of the superintendent of the material world called Maya Devi, Durga Devi, who actually happens to be Krishna's great devotee. So when we surrender to Krishna, then she will release her grip, just like the Pujari releases the bulldog clip from the curtain. Just easily takes the bulldog clip away and the Lord is revealed. So Maya can do that. She's there to test us, are you sincere? Do you want to really serve Krishna? Or are you just trying to gate crash Krishna's eternal party? You're just playing at being a devotee? And then social test us. You say, oh, you used to like this, do you want some more? Oh yes, I'll see if I can just have some of that and nobody will notice. And then secretly we may enjoy some sense gratification. Or we may do something which is ordinarily in devotee circles would be considered unacceptable. So I was just reading, Satyananda Maharaj was saying that in our journey in this lifetime, the fact that we come to Krishna consciousness means that we had already cultivated self-realization in previous lives. And we came to a certain obstacle, which meant we didn't complete it. Krishna explains that for the unsuccessful yogi, then they take birth in one of two situations, usually Suchinam Srimatam Gehe, Yoga Brasta Vijayate. For the unsuccessful yogi or the unsuccessful aspirant of self-realization, then they take birth again to get the opportunity to pick up from where they left off. So that's what we're doing here. We're getting an opportunity to come to the point where we were in the previous life, and whatever obstacle was there, we get the opportunity to try to overcome it again. So if you've ever seen horse show jumping, you ever seen that on the television? Sometimes you see people who ride these horses and they jump over big fences and walls, etc. And sometimes they start off with the small ones, and then they do a big one, and then maybe go a few small ones just to keep the horse confident. And then usually they finish with the tallest wall, isn't it? That's the biggest obstacle. So when they come to that, sometimes the horse will stop. It doesn't want to do it. And then what do? The jockey will take the horse round the course again, jump over the small ones, and then finally you get up some momentum, and then he'll take the horse over it. And even if he knocks a few blocks off, at least he's got the confidence. So Krishna has given us this cycle of birth and death. He's given us the opportunity again and again to overcome the obstacles which stand between us and him. Not that we get it wrong and we're punished forever, and there's never another chance in eternity. How would that be a loving God? Loving God, just like a parent, if a child does something wrong, you don't slap it for the rest of its life. That's it. You spilt that milk on the carpet, you're finished forever. if a human being cannot be more merciful than the Lord, cannot be more compassionate or forgiving than the Lord, because whatever qualities we have in minute quantity. The Lord has them in unlimited quantity. So Krishna is so so forgiving and so eager to help us that he comes time after time after time, and he sends his devotees, his dear devotees, he sends them into difficult situations to remind us where we belong. So simply becoming a demigod means we surrender to an obstacle. No offense against any demigods, but they're saying it here in the purports in the verse, so they're admitting it themselves. That they recognize, that any kind of material involvement is an obstacle. And that's why we're in this material world, because we want to try and enjoy separately from Krishna. But it's not possible, because everything we try to enjoy separately from Krishna is Krishna's energy anyway. It's still his. There's nothing, they say there's nothing in the world but Krishna, apart from Maya, and that's also Krishna. So this is this particular age we're living in, Kali Yuga. It's characterized by different qualities, short-lived, always disturbed, etc. Anyone remember any of the other glorious qualities of Kali Yuga? Quarrelsome, hypocrisy, yeah. Always disturbed. Lazy, misguided, and above all, always disturbed. So above all these wonderful qualities, we're disturbed. Doesn't take much to create a war. Sometimes you see countries going to war over nothing, and you think, what's happening? Why are we at war over what this is? And it's usually because a couple of guys got together and decided they want to steal something from another country, or they don't like your ideology, so we're going to impose our ideology on yours, our faulty ideology on your faulty ideology. So this has been going on since time immemorial. But it's wonderful, Kali Dosha Nidhi Rajan Mahaguna Sahapatma, that even though Kali Yuga is an ocean of faults, it's easy to find fault with anybody. It's not so difficult because we all have so many faults. But it's wonderful that simply by chanting Hare Krishna one can be Mukta Sangam Param Vrajet, promoted to the kingdom of God. So of course there are some rules, although there's no hard and fast rules for chanting. There are some do's and don'ts to make it easy. Just like when you're in a car, you can go anywhere you want with that car, but you have to abide by the highway code, and that way you can continue on the path. So we have some devotee code which helps us stay on the path. Give way here, so that means be humble. Don't be an upstart. Don't be proud. That doesn't help us, When the stop sign says stop, so we don't. Pride is something which is unattractive to Krishna. But when a devotee is humble, then Krishna is attracted by that devotee's humility. And although Krishna is considered all attractive, he's attracted by the devotee's selfless devotional service. And when Krishna is so attracted by our endeavors to please him and to serve the devotees, that Krishna becomes so attracted by the devotee's sincere service that Krishna then takes that soul back to Godhead. So this is our goal, to learn how to get out of this I, me, and mine consciousness, everything just for me, because we're thinking I, me, and mine, but as soon as we do that, then we assume responsibility for ourselves in such a way as we become answerable for everything, and we are therefore cultivate fear, But if we act according to Krishna conscious guidelines, then although we're still responsible, we are not accountable to any karmic reaction because we're not performing any karmic activity. And then one can become, as much as one is authorized in their activity in Krishna consciousness, that amount, they can be free from fear and attachment. Anyone get any questions or comments?
Two online questions by which I'll ask one and then maybe the other one. So, how does someone transcend bodily misery? Sensory distractions are pervasive.
I couldn't hear the last part you said.
Sensory distractions are pervasive.
What?
Sensory distractions are pervasive.
Sensually?
Yeah.
Sensory distractions are pervasive.
Yeah. That's a very good question, and it applies to all of us. Thanks for that question. Is that Eamon?
No, it's child.
Okay, thanks. So there's a verse, Rishikena, Sevanam Bhakti Uchite. When we engage our senses in the service of Krishna, who is the master of the senses, who has complete control of his senses, then our senses also become controlled. So we transcend happiness and distress by remembering this verse from chapter 2, verse 14, to see both happiness and distress as temporary. So everything which begins has an end. When we're enjoying ourselves, we're thinking, oh, this is great. I wish this would never end. But we know that it will come to an end. It will become spent. And then when we're suffering in some way, then we really look forward to that coming to an end because our desire is to enjoy. But the material world doesn't allow us to enjoy perpetually because this happiness and distress. So we transcend it by continuing with our hearing and chanting and whatever service we can do in Krishna consciousness. So despite whatever's happening, we continue to do it. So this is something Krishna points out in the Bhagavad Gita. Often to Arjuna is to do our duty. So our spiritual duty, we have some material duties. We may have to perform those. Willingly or unwillingly, we have to do them anyway. Just like typically the parents have to clothe and feed and house the children. They have to do that. They can't be irresponsible and say, I don't like this duty, I'm giving it up. I'm just going to chant Hare Krishna. That would be an irresponsible thing to do. So we have our material duties to maintain, but we also have our spiritual duties, which is regularly chanting and reading and hearing. And when we continue with that, despite the ups and downs that come along, and we don't give up, then we're transcending it. Is that okay? And in due course of time, then there'll be no more happiness and distress. All that will be left, when all the reactions are burnt up and we are not plugging the fan back into the wall, the momentum, when we unplug the fan, the momentum carries on for some time. And sometimes we think, oh, it's never going to stop. I may as well plug it back in. And it just carries on again. So the momentum of our karma may be there where we take up Krishna consciousness practice, but we still have some residual karma, momentum of residual karma there. But if we remain unplugged from karmic activities, then in due course, we will realize that we are actually in a transcendental position, have always been transcendental to this material world, but we just got absorbed in it like some kind of bad dream. Is that okay? And there was another question.
And by the way, it's anyone saying using his friend's iPad. So Next question is, does chanting Krishna's holy names evoke the reciprocal love necessary to live in the material world?
Could you repeat that again?
Does chanting Krishna's holy names evoke the reciprocal love necessary to live in the material world?
Sorry, I have difficulty understanding a couple of words you're saying.
Say it slowly and clear.
Does chanting Krishna's holy names evoke the reciprocal love?
Sorry, there's two words I just can't understand what you're saying.
Does chanting the holy names evoke reciprocal love?
Oh,
Necessary.
evoke, right.
Necessary.
Does it evoke?
Yes.
Yeah. So, sorry I couldn't understand what you're saying. It's just, I'm a bit hard of hearing, and this is an added austerity of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness, as we have so many different languages and accents. Sometimes I'm in meetings and people can't understand what I'm saying because it's Scottish accent, but in Scotland everybody understands each other. In India everyone understands each other, but when we have this added austerity of... So forgive me if to ask you to repeat so many times, but yes, Prabhupada explains in the purport to the Maha Mantra, this chanting Hare Krishna is like the genuine cry of the child calling for mother Hara. So we're calling for Krishna, please come and protect me, please save me. Krishna, 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 Raksha Mam. Krishna, 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 Pahi Mam. Raksha means protect me, Pahi means to maintain me. So, or to save me. So this genuine cry of the child is feeling vulnerable in the material world. It's feeling vulnerable, and it senses that the mother will take care of it. The mother is feeding me, the mother's giving me shelter, giving me warmth, etc. So typically it is natural for the living entity especially in times of suffering or desperation, frustration, etc., to come to the conclusion that I've tried it all and it's not working. I'm just going to depend on Krishna. So this is there. In Bhagavad Gita also, Krishna says, what's the Sanskrit? After many, many births, Bahunam Janmanam Ante Gyanavam Mam Prapajate Vasudeva Sarvamiti Samahatma Sadurlabha. Thank you. So we have come into this material world, Brahmanda Brahmadi Konya Bhagavan Jeev Guru Krishna Prasadi Pai Bhaktilata Bij, that we have been in this world for practically untraceable amount of time, untraceable amount of births, wandering through many species, many different bodies, different planets, etc. And we come to this human form of life, and by the mercy of Krishna, one gets a spiritual master. When the living entity desires, who am I? What is this world all about? What is my greatest benefit? What's the best benefit I can have? Then Krishna directs us. He directs the wanderings of all living entities. And he fulfills the desires. Just like we were saying earlier, we have to be careful what we desire because we might get it. But when we desire Krishna, that is the best desire. When we desire to understand, why am I here? Where do I belong? Where did I come from? So when we're like that, and then we call on Krishna for that shelter, then Krishna reciprocates immediately. So this Krishna consciousness movement is all about reciprocation. The devotees are reciprocating with each other through 6 types of living exchanges. I talked to you, what are they?
Giving and receiving gifts.
Giving and receiving gifts.
Revealing your mind in confidence.
Revealing your mind in confidence, that's 3. Inquiring confidentially. Serving prasad, food offered to Krishna and receiving prasad. So these loving exchanges are a reciprocation of love between one devotee and another. And Krishna is very pleased to see that when the devotees are engaging in these 6 types of loving reciprocations. He's not so pleased when he sees the devotees are arguing with each other, material world is there, so sometimes our conditioning gets in the way. But then even if we have some bad exchange, we can clear that up by we offer our apologies, offer our obeisances, offer some prasad or a gift or something like that. And ultimately, Krishna reciprocates according to our desire. So if we desire to know Krishna and we desire to learn to love Krishna, Krishna also wants that. And that's why he's with us as a super soul situated within the heart. He's simply waiting on us to turn back to him. Krishna already loves us, and we have the eternal relationship there, but we've forgotten. So the process of chanting, reading, serving, etc., then it's a process of reawakening our lost love. Okay, I hope that helps. Thank you for the question. Iskon Govinda ki, Sri Prabhupada ki, Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki, Nitai Gaur Premanande, Gaura Bhaktivinoda ki.